Hello, everybody. What's going on? May peace and power elevation be to all of you. What's happening on this beautiful day? Yes. Thank you all for tuning in. This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect. So today I want to do a topic on African American sculpture and someone that deals with visual arts. Now, visual arts is very prominent within the Black community. We talking about either from painting, we're talking about photographing, right? Taking pictures and things like that. And also sculptures. You have so many African American sculptures out there who can, have who has a great photographic memory, especially, and can make images or make us a statue or a sculpture look like something real. You know what I mean? Give it life. So our people was very gifted in that and very talented when it came down to, especially making the African sculpture. So one of the brothers here who I'm going to talk about, his name is Sargent Johnson. Sargent Claude Johnson was a visual artist and a painter, a sculptor, and he had so many names added to his belt. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Show you who he is. All right. So as you can see, that's Sargent Johnson. All right. So let's get into his life and his story, his legacy. Okay. Okay. So here it is. Sargent Claude Johnson. He was born on October the 7th of 1888 and he died on October the 10th of 1967. He was one of the first African American artists working in California to achieve a national reputation. He was known as the abstract, figurative, and early modern styles. Oh yeah, he was known for abstract, figurative, and early modern styles. He was a painter, potter, ceramicist, paint maker, graphic artist, sculptor, and carver. He worked with a variety of media, including ceramics, clay, oil, stone, terracotta, watercolor, and wood. All right. So we're gonna get into his early life. All right. So Sargent Johnson was the third of six children, born to a father of Swedish descent and mother of African American and Cherokee ancestry. His father died in 1897. His mother died of tuberculosis only 5 years after in 1902. Early on, Sargent and his siblings went to live with their uncle, Sherman Jackson William, and his wife, May Howard Jackson, in Washington, D.C. May was a pioneer African American sculptor, specializing in portrait busts with Negro themes, and she undoubtedly influenced Sargent Johnson at an early age. Later, the boys of the family were sent to an orphanage in Worcester, Massachusetts, and the girls to a Catholic school for African American and Native American girls in Pennsylvania. Some of his siblings did not identify themselves as African American and chose to live as either Native Americans or Caucasian, though Sargent identified as African American. All right. Johnson transitioned from practicing artist to professional is largely undocumented, though some say he left from Boston to Chicago to live with some relatives in 1915. Sargent Johnson moved to San Francisco Bay Area. The Panama Pacific International Exposition, which had a stimulating influence on California art, took place shortly after his move. The same year, Sargent Johnson married Pearl Lawson and began studying drawing and painting at the A.W. Best School of Art. He attended the California School of Fine Arts, now the San Francisco Art Institution, from 1919 to 1923, where his teacher included the sculptors was it Biamino Buffano and Ralph Stockpole. Consuelo Canega, A photographer of that time knew him well and said of Johnson, he was very beautiful in his spirit. The way he talked, the way he thought, the way he worked, the way he felt. Don't mean he didn't I don't mean he didn't have problems. He had terrible problems, but he was still beautiful. It was his spirit, the way he looked at everything. All right. So as you can see, okay, right here, this is one of his artworks. All right, it's Chester, 1931, portrait of African American boy, differs sharply from the most portraits in its classic simplicity in the thoughtfulness of the subject. It appears in 1931. All right. So let's go down. It says Johnson produced witty, sophisticated work that ranges from jaunty interpretation of African masks to lithographs to small scale figures. All right. And then it says that Sargent Johnson began showing his work with the Harmon Foundation of New York in 1926. Through the foundation, for its support of African American art, he exhibited many of his pieces and became locally and then nationally known. There was a total of 87 pieces displayed at the show, and $150 prize for most outstanding work went to Johnson, showing a Polynesian head of a Negro child, Pearl, and two drawing, one of which defiant is massively constructed and as simple in its planes as it is so much of the modern Mexican work. He was usually not included in American art because of how his pieces ignored traditional Western techniques and were inspired by foreign cultures, such as Mexican mutualists Diego Rivera, Jose Clemente Orozco, David Alfaro Cinqueros, and others. In 1928, Johnson award-winning artwork garnered him fame amongst artists in the Harlem Renaissance movement. In the late 1930s, Sargent Johnson commissioned his work with the Federal Arts Project. As a member of the Bohemian San Francisco Bay community and influenced by the New Negro movement, Sargent Johnson's early work focused on racial identity. Okay. Sargent Johnson work is notable for its clean simplicity, directness, and strength of conception and execution. He focused most of his works on his depiction of African Americans, especially in redefining the image of the African American woman. Johnson said, it is the pure American Negro I am concerned with, aiming to show the natural beauty and dignity in that characteristic lip and that characteristic hair, bearing, and manner. And I wish to show that beauty not so much to the white man as to the Negro himself. Until I can interest my race, I am sunk. Also, Negroes are a colorful race. They call for an art as colorful as they can be made. Now, I'm gonna stop right there. He said Negroes are a colorful race, right? So therefore, Mr. Johnson acknowledged the diversity in African Americans. Okay. So I want to stop right there because we got people believing that black people are supposed to be totally dark skinned. Then we got those who believe that blacks are just, they supposed to be light skinned. So you have a case of the light skin versus the dark skin situation going on. And we all come in unique form. You know what I'm saying? We all are one. We are a very diverse group of people. Even those in the continent, you're not going to always see a dark-skinned African. Okay? Now, that's particularly on the skin complexion, however, but that's not always the case. You may see somebody my complexion. You may see an African lighter than me. That happens. So you have to understand there is diversity within the African American culture and within the African diaspora, period. All right. So let's just go back. Okay. All right, beginning in the 1940s, Johnson's work became less focused on racial themes and more abstract in its design. Even though this changed in style, the importance of racial identity can still be seen in his figures. Johnson never made enough to support himself through his art, so he worked many odd jobs during the day while focusing on his art during the evenings and weekends. He continued to participate in local expeditions and accepted private commissions to supplement his income. Beginning in 1945, continuing through 1965, Sargent Johnson made a number of trips to Asiaca and southern Mexico and started incorporating the people and culture, particularly archaeology, into his work. Other subjects include African American figures, animals, and Native Americans. Johnson also began experimenting with different types of mediums, such as ceramics and paint, during this time also. And then in his personal life, in 1936, Johnson and his wife separated. His only daughter, Pearl, was sent to live with her mother. But in 1947, Johnson's former wife was hospitalized. In 1964, she died at Stockton State Hospital. Leading up to her death, Johnson remained on good terms with her and visited her regularly. His wife and his family had a profound impact on his artwork, as most of his pieces center around those he loved. Johnson died at his home in California on October the 10th of 1967 from a heart attack. He had been suffering from severe angina pectoris for nearly 2 decades. Mm. Wow, basically he done had chest pains. All right, so let's look at the auction work. All right, on February 23rd, 2010, Swan Galleries auctioned Sergeant Claude Johnson's untitled Standing Woman, a painting to terracotta sculpture from that circle around 1933, between 1933 and 1935, for $52,000 $52,800. An auction recorded at the time for the artist. In 2009, the University of California, Berkeley unwittingly sold a work by Johnson for $164.63. That was later valued at more than $1 million. Wow. The the 22-foot carved redwood relief panel was eventually purchased by the Huntington Library and will be displayed in its new American wing. Okay. All right. So there's other sources that we can find to make sure that this information is relevant. So here we go. If y'all can see my page. All right, it got Sargent Johnson, sculptor, ceramist, and printmaker. All right. So let's see what else we can find right here. Okay. All right, so right here it says Johnson's work was certainly different from most American sculptors of that time. Unlike them, he used the art of pre-Columbian America, Asia, and especially Africa as his model, not Greco-Roman art. Sculpture was never meant to be colorless, he said in his defense. There is no reason why it should be. Most ancient sculpture, with the exception of the late Greek, was polychrome. In the 1930s, were Johnson's most productive decade, he produced some of his finest sculptures, including Forever Free, a wood sculpture of a black mother and her two children, and two monumental stone figures of Indians and on Emalas completed for the Golden Gate International Exposition in San Francisco in 1939. Okay, let me see if I can find that. Forever Free. Hmm. All right. Well, I seem to not be able to find it, but hold on. Okay. Well, let me show you guys one of his sculpture real quick. Okay. So this is one of his artworks right here. Okay. This is the one of the artworks that he did. All right. So let me go back and continue on where I was reading. Johnson's 1940 frieze, a decorative sculpture in low relief designed for a wall at George Washington High School's football field, won in a competition held by the San Francisco Arts Commission. Um, Guillermo Bufano was another contestant. On hearing he had lost to his former pupil, Bufano was so enraged that he severed all connection with Johnson. Came back. Then came another dark moment in Johnson's personal life. His wife was committed to a state hospital in the late 1930s. Although they were separated at the time, Johnson faithfully visited her until her death in 1964. All right. It says Johnson continued to experiment with new materials and forms throughout his life. In 1947, he began to work on emerald steel plates after meeting a man who company made them. He completed more than 100 panel plates and even was commissioned to make a plate for Harold's, a Reno gambling casino. This steel mural of pioneers heading west in a wagon train is the largest mural of its kind. Johnson traveled twice to Mexico to study its art during the 1940s, and in 1958, at the age of 71, he spent 7 months in Japan studying Shinto shrine. Some of his last sculptures were made of diorite, a granular igneous rock that he collected at Big Sur, California. All right. So it says here he died at the age of 80. All right. And of course, there go the quote again. It said, "It is the pure American Negro I am concerned with, aiming to show the natural beauty and dignity. I wish to show that beauty not so much to the white man as to the Negro himself." Mm-hmm. All right, and so it comes from this book. If you want to find out more information about visual artists, it's called A to Z of African Americans, the African American in Visual Arts. All right, written by Stephen Afinowski. Stephen Afinowski. All right, so there it goes. And these are the table of contents right here. Okay, and list of informations, acknowledgement, introduction, Sarah. Okay, so if you guys want to learn more here, you can look it up for yourself right here. Okay, it's on PDF, or I'm quite sure you can find it on Amazon. All right, there we go. Okay, so with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching and tuning in. So that's all for today regarding to African American history and the story about Sargent Johnson. So if you want to look up more, you can do that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share the channel. Make sure you also hit the notification bell whenever I come on. So, that way you'll know. And you can share this video as well, too. And make sure you share some information, all right? Until then, y'all have a good one. May peace and power elevation be to all of you. This your girl, Tiffany. And I'm logging off of here. So thank you so much for tuning in. All right. Until next time, take it easy.